What's up? It's Tom from Cannabis Legalization News. Today, we sit down with Carlos Martinez from Legal Solutions of New Mexico to discuss the Land of Enchantment's new cannabis bill. But before we find out how much it costs to open a dispensary in New Mexico or what the deadline is for the application, like this video and click subscribe to our channel because it really helps us grow. Don't forget to drop us a comment with your question about New Mexico cannabis laws. And you definitely want to hit that bell because that's when you'll get notified when we go live on Cannabis Legalization News. Thank you so much for joining us. It's another episode of Cannabis Legalization News. My name's Tom.
Miggy, this is the New Mexico episode.
Yeah, it's a New Mexico episode. If you want to get a license in New Mexico, you've probably called me at cannabisindustrylawyer.com before, fielding a lot of calls from there. But if you are trying to get a license, smash some likes and click subscribe because we're going to have a lot of information about how you can go about doing your application. It is not a limited market. It's not like Seattle. It's not like Chicago. It is open, rolling. It seems more like Michigan, but I bet our guest is going to let us know if it's substantially similar to Michigan or if it's slightly different, because it sounds like anybody can get a license that has a complete application and that qualifies for a license in New Mexico.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into this. What up, Carlos?
Good morning, gentlemen. Miggy, Tom, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, Carlos Martinez. I'm a cannabis law attorney here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Work with Legal Solutions of New Mexico. I've been practicing cannabis law since 2010. My firm, my partner, McKinsey St. Dennis, we started in 2017. We deal with license preparation, applications, license reviews, business formation, a lot of the transactional stuff, and as well as trial work. We're litigation attorneys, so if for some reason you find yourself in court, we're ready to go to court, I guess.
Man, that happens so often because there's partners and there's money and there's contracts and then there's SPVs and then so many things that can go wrong. So it's fascinating work, the formation of the corporations, the operation, and then when they go wrong, you can sue for them.
Carlos, how have you been in business from 2010 when New Mexico just legalized it?
So New Mexico just legalized recreational the cannabis program here in 2021. 2010 was the first year that they put out the rules for the medical programs, and then those were subsequently revised in 2015. So we've been dealing in the medical side for the last 10 years, and now since June, I've been getting into the recreational side of things.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, I've been reviewing the regulations that are there and the online portal. Tell us a little bit about how you go about applying for a cannabis license in the state of New Mexico.
So you could do a couple different ways. Some people come in with a plan. Others who are less prepared do not come in with a plan. But nonetheless, they've made it very simple. You open a portal. You go in there. You provide the information that is required for their license application. It is substantially less than what the rules and regulations require to have for a completed application. But nonetheless, you go ahead, you submit your documentation. And once the New Mexico Regulation and Licensing Department determines that it's a complete application, they review it. They have 90 days to get back to you. And if they are requiring any additional information, they'll let you know about that as well.
And then do you have to do the actual complete application, or is that all wrapped in? Is it more of a conditional style application like in other states?
So since this is brand new, I've heard stories that they're turning them around within 5 to 10 days. Now, what turning them around means, I don't know if they're outright granting them or if they are saying you need additional information. But to my understanding of the policies and procedures, once you get that license, you're ready to operate, you're ready to go. There's a lot of intangibles, obviously, that kind of hold this back. A lot of the zoning hasn't really caught up with everything. So we have that issue going around with each jurisdiction that you're applying in. And then just basically, I mean, it's brand new for everybody. It's brand new for all the local jurisdictions. It's brand new for, law enforcement. Everybody's going to have to understand and implement these rules who were written not necessarily by cannabis law attorneys, but, legislatures and other interests.
All right. So, Carlos, you're telling me at this moment in time, I could do a screenshot, go to the New Mexico website, if I had $2,000 to apply for, and get a registration right now, get a license right now?
You can get an application completed. Yes, they have a time to review it. So within 90 days is when they say that they will get back to you. But within those 90 days, yeah, you can get a license. You can begin operations, start growing. Recreational sales aren't anticipated to start until April of next year. But right now, cannabis producer licenses and cannabis producer micro business licenses are up and running.
So they don't require the board's oversight. They don't have to inspect your facility and come in and say you comply with all the strictures of the regulations from New Mexico. Now you have an operational license.
So the way that it operated on the medical side of things, they absolutely had to go and do a review and a walkthrough. It is not detailed necessarily in these particular rules, which came out. So although it's silent, it is a very good idea that they're going to come out there and take a look. You have to, secure fire inspections and certificates of occupancy. So you're already having a couple of walkthroughs anyway, but the RLD is kind of making this up as they go along. It's been an interesting ride. They were supposed to have a cannabis regulatory advisory committee already put together to help with these first 2 license applications. And that was put together after the 2 applications came out. So it's kind of mystical as to who's drafting up the rules right now. Nobody really knows. They're supposed to be, assisted with the CRAC committee, but we're just going by what they throw out at this time.
What is included in an application? Because I've charged clients in other more competitive states not a pretty penny, a price that was commensurate with the market for completing their application. How thick is the New Mexico application? Because I've done them before. They're hundreds of pages long.
Sure. So the application portal requests substantially less documentation than what's in the rules, right? So along with identifying, your building, where your outdoor grow, wherever you're going to grow, you have to run your background checks. You have to have standard operating procedures drafted for, wastage and disposal of cannabis. You have to provide a schematic drawn to scale of your operation. There's some interesting requirements this year on the recreational side of things. You have to have a water right or proof that you have the right to develop a water right, or documentation from a water provider stating, that number one, you're within our rules that you can use the water, and the amount of water that you're using is going to be sufficient for the size of the grow that you're operating. That's required. There's an additional economic and social equity piece and diversity piece that wasn't required on the medical side of things. But there's a lot of other drafting, and a lot of that drafting, can take place with the business owners themselves, their standard operating procedures and policies, or, they can farm that out to us or any other, capable cannabis law attorney. So it's kind of hard.
But then that it just, because it's so wide open, it's like, well, why are they even requiring these? Are they even going to look at them?
It's a good question. That's a good question that a lot of people have had, and they're wondering the same thing. We go on the side of security and say, yeah, absolutely. They have every right to go and check to make sure you have your policies and procedures that are in accordance with the rules and regs. Because otherwise, if you don't, then you're going to get dinged, and you're going to get fined, and then, possibly have your license suspended or revoked. So, but it does not require anything on the portal, to my knowledge, that you have to have all of this submitted. You have to have it according to the rules, but you don't have to have it on the portal.
That may be what gets kicked back after the 90 days. They're like, okay, you've been pre-qualified. Now please submit all these things. And then if they don't get back to them within 90 days, maybe they drop them off and be like, you have to start over.
Sure. And they will drop an application if it's non-responsive in regards to additional details or, whatever they're requiring from the applicant.
Do you think it's safe to say too, like, I mean, I know I make it sound real easy that like I can just like create the portal now. I mean, first off, you have to have funds, right? Like in any business endeavor, you got to have a little bit of liquidation to keep you going before you pick up. But because like in your position, I might be able to get a license or whatever to start the application, but I'm still going to need a lot of localized process and procedure to be done. And especially in cannabis, like every state's so different. The cannabis law alone, like Tom does the banking, he's very informed with like the structure, the infrastructure of a business. There's a lot of requirements. Do you find that you have to meet? There's a lot of New Mexico, like the water right thing. There's gonna be a lot of localized stuff going on out there, and you would say you probably meet that need, don't you?
We like to think we do, and yes, there is local need in regards to that that economic and social equity policy. I mean, they really want to focus on New Mexico. How are you going to help New Mexico? How are you going to help its residents? How are you going to provide to its economy? So a lot of it is localized. A lot of the water issues out here. We have local water associations, local water community associations, acequias, ditches. We have a lot of that, and we're a mountain desert, so we don't have a lot of water. So it is very local. There's a lot of local issues. A lot of farmers who in the rural, more agricultural areas, they grow hay for horses. They're going to be affected if people are trying to get land out there and get on their water rights. So there is a lot of local flavor that needs to be put into the application, and we think that we provide that service.
Are there any areas in New Mexico that have sufficient rainwater that we could maybe like create our own water supply, or is it just straight desert over there?
It's straight desert over here. We've been in a drought for as long as I've been alive, so I've never really seen us come out of it. But a good year on rain, you're talking about maybe less than 6 inches, at least in Albuquerque. I think we're at 4.5 right now, and we're just going through our monsoons.
Really, we got 6 inches of rain in 24 hours over where I live. I mean, like, it's just wet and wild out there. But that's we don't have any water rights stuff, but our regulations relative to everything else are completely cockamamie. Like, it's an oligopoly almost, and you can't get a license unless you thread a needle that's really, really difficult to approach. So they aren't going to go with that in New Mexico. How many people do you anticipate getting a license?
Getting a license that's a good question. I know there was an article recently that within the first week of it being open, over 900 people, 900 plus had already applied. So of those 900, how many were complete applications? I would be willing to bet it was a fraction of those. And then, within that, a lot of the, already established players from the medical side of things, I'm sure, had the insight on that. So I don't know how many they're going to give out. There's no cap on the licenses. There's nothing in the rules, in the statute, in the bill. It's going to be interesting if one gets developed along the way with the Cannabis Regulatory Advisory Committee, which is also comprised of all non-cannabis experts besides one past producer. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with those licenses. But I mean, as long as you have a complete application and your infrastructure is ready to go, you're pretty much going to get green lighted.
Are the fees that are being applied through the portal, are they refundable, or is the state just racking it in right now?
So I haven't seen anything that says that they are refundable on the medical side.
I recall
of things,
something that said that they weren't.
But I don't.
I'm in as the state comes up, it's like read the rules, read the regs, and like with New Mexico, I'm like, well, this will be really interesting. It looks like it's going to be pretty open, and then the downside of that, when it is so open, I'm really worried about all these operators that are going to get going in New Mexico and get their asses handed to them when the IRS audits because they didn't set it. They didn't pay me. They were like, I don't need to pay this guy, and then I know what I'm doing. I'm an American. I'm an entrepreneur, and they have no idea how 280E works. And so they just get knocked out of business in 3 years because they owe like $400,000 in unpaid taxes.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that because one of the 36 medical licenses, to my understanding, one of them got terminated because of tax issues. I'm pretty sure it was specific to 280E, but
wow.
Miggy, in terms of, I don't think they're refundable. The medical side of things it was a $10,000 fee to apply to be a licensed nonprofit producer. $9,000 was refundable if you weren't accepted. So,
because the only reason I ask, because it seems like, yeah, ideally it sounds really cool that there's unlimited licenses, but in the end, like you said, like, the personal struggle out there as far as like the water alone. Like, I've lived in Tucson, I've lived in the desert. I know what it's like the good old boys are gonna get theirs first, and then like maybe an MSO might come in. Like, this is not going to be still an easy, like, I know there's gonna be a couple people like you're gonna take their life savings out and be like, this is what I want to do. I have $500K and I can start a cannabis business in New Mexico. And then with no lawyer or no plan, you're gonna go into New Mexico and like, but I got this land. Oh, what do you mean I got to do water rights? And then I got,
what do you mean growing weed indoors is hard,
right? No, exactly though. There's going to be a lot of like I think people jumping in, but at the same token, because of your guys', there's actually a lack of space if you consider it, thinking about the water. Right, water's essential, guys.
Yeah, I mean, how much weight? Because like New Mexico's got some of those areas in the desert, which would just be beautiful for a light depth greenhouses because they have a nice temperature thing. But what good is that if you ain't got no water?
Right. No, that's absolutely correct. And I don't think that anyone has necessarily taken that into account, but it is a very valued resource over here. So it's going to be interesting in regards to those issues that are I'm sure just waiting to pop up here in the next month or so.
Carlos, is there a like, since you have medical already and there's been a medical market already, is there a cannabis culture out there? Like, is there going to be a defining, like, who the recreational market needs to appeal to? You know, the actual consumers who are even like connoisseurs. You know, like people like, oh, is that a baby kush with some terpenes and you know what I mean? Like, what is the scene out there already?
The scene has been evolving, right? So it's evolved. Obviously, you have your reefer madness,
That's
people.
still there. It's there.
Sometimes
it's everywhere. I don't get it.
Is. In the smaller counties in the South, it seems prevalent still. So you still have those. Then you have some of those reefer madness people that have been converted because they do see the benefits of the medical because, grandma has, cancer or grandma has arthritis or they're seeing the medical benefits of that. So you have a little, some converts. But it's been a general acceptance, I'd say, throughout the state. I mean, New Mexico has, it's very, it's very diverse in terms of the people that live here. But we have it used for ceremonial purposes, recreational purposes, lots of medicinal purposes. It's been accepted. I would say as a community, but the regulators and the licensing people and the legislatures, they represent their counties that are not necessarily open to it. So it's been kind of a battle there. Recently, we had a failed recreational bill in 2020. And then this version that got passed in the special session in 2021, I think is had a strong push from, the governor here. She made it a priority to get that through. So, but I think it's going to appeal to a diverse population. I mean, out-of-state tourists, we border Mexico. So there's a lot of, Mexican nationals that have come this way and have purchased inventory and then taken it back south to Mexico, which is a unique thing. And then the huge border. Yeah. And then the huge border with Texas. I mean, they have a really restrictive everything, it seems like these days. So,
oh man, if you guys want to open a dispo on the border of Texas and a grow, get at me at cannabisindustrylawyer.com because that would be really fun to have. And so, hey, let's talk a little bit about the taxes because one of the best things, and some people are like, oh, don't tax it. I'm like, those tax dollars can go to pay for all these problems that we caused by this drug war. How are they spending the tax money in New Mexico?
Well, they do have an excise tax attached to this that goes up, I believe, a point every year for about 7 years. So as to what it starts at, I'm not positive, but I know that it increases to a point. And that's only on the recreational sales, obviously. The medical sales do not have that. Where the tax is going, they are theoretically being reinfused into the community to better the community. But, there's a lot of backdoor operations. So where does it go? Ultimately, I don't know. I know where I want it to go. And I want it to, everybody says that we have to catch up with the rest of the United States of America. Let's reinvest in the infrastructure and, education and everything big that, what we need here in New Mexico to make us not necessarily last in education in every report that we read, but maybe, leading in some cases in regards to reinvestment into our communities.
Yeah, it'd be great to see if you can figure out the water issue, but tax dollars from weed can do a lot of things. Invent water, I don't think is one of them.
That's true.
Well, New Mexico sounds like it'd be prime. Like once we cross borders and you're able to federally do it, like I've been in New Mexico. It's a beautiful spot. You got that chili festival once a year out there. Amazing food. But like, again, lack of water, just like with Vegas, right? Like amazing spots to go vacationing. But, Oregon had, and Washington, we have way too much weed. The there could be fundamental things that could benefit each other until that day. But I really appreciate that you mentioned the fact that you have reefer madness there, but also the spirituality, how people recognize the use of it. Because correct me if I'm wrong, New Mexico has a large reservation population, right? Like in the desert areas. I had a friend down in Tucson, or in the northern. His family was up there, and I'm not sure what res that was, but I always just thought it was funny how alcohol was made and destroyed reservation, native communities. And cannabis is this thing that a study just came out for college kids saying less drinking's being done because there's more smoking being done. Cannabis use is always a wellness thing and a spirituality thing, as far as like it's the less evil of recreational. Do you think that's picking up there as well, or is it just more like, no, government say bad, you bad?
I think it's becoming absolutely more tolerated for sure. And then in addition to, the more spiritual use of it, it helps a lot of the population that are suffering with opioid abuse. And they're having a lot of successes in being able to wean themselves off of, the drugs that could actually kill you. Right. So it's being accepted more so on the medical scale. A lot of, practitioners are recognizing the benefits, not just, medical doctors, but, osteopathy, you have your optometrists, dentists are even talking about utilizing it in creams and toothpaste and things of that nature. So I think that a lot of people are seeing the benefits outside of it's just somewhere we can go get high, we can go, purchase something. I mean, there's actual, there's methods to the madness. And if you use it right, whether it's flower, whether it's edibles, tinctures, oils, it can provide substantial benefits, for whatever, may be ailing you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things about these open market concepts, though, if I was going to try to get into Oklahoma, I would plan my ass off before trying to get into Oklahoma, because I would need the capital. You're competing with like 10,000 other license holders, and I love the business models idea where no, we're going to be a vertical. Are you allowed to be vertical first? I mean, we can be located on the border of Texas and do like a water rights study to find out where the best flow is, but can you even be vertical?
So on the medical side of things, it was the only option. You had to be a vertically integrated. So it was seed to sale for the licensed nonprofit producers, and they had to be titled nonprofit just because that's what they said that you had to be as an owner. You do definitely not get any nonprofit status with the IRS or anything. You don't get any of those advantages. Yeah. That's for sure. But right now, the two licenses that are available are basically for production and cultivation, and then you can sell wholesale to other cannabis establishments. The vertically integrated, the medical practitioners who are vertically integrated, their license is a legacy license, and that carries over. So they're able to still continue operating under that license until the equivalent comes out, which is in January. But in the January, they should have coming out the vertically integrated cannabis establishment license, the Vice license is like I like to call it. And that's vertically integrated, seed to sale. And then there's the same version of that, but it's a micro business license. So you're capped at 200 plants, but you still have, the rights to do seed to sale on that particular license as well.
Wow. Oh, 420. It's 420 somewhere. 20 past the hour. So let's talk about that 200 plant thing, because just doing some math on that, you're able to go the whole plant. So you can do wholesale into retail and sell it to the end consumer. But is that 200 plants in flower, or is that 200 plants in total?
200 mature plants, and being mature is defined, I believe, as showing the first signs of sex. So once that's established, it magically turns into a mature plant. So it's silent as to the amount of vegetative or clone that you can have on premises, which is interesting. You do have to disclose that in your application as to how many you're going to have, but it's silent as to a cap or anything.
That's great. You can pheno hunt then. You can pop 100 seeds, but the 200 plants, that's still not all that much weight, even if you do it at the retail level. I mean, it may only, I'd have to do the turn math on that. I can't do this in my head. Well, why can't you do 200 plants at 5.7 harvests times, 50 grams per square foot, and then tell me what that is in pounds in your head?
Shit.
That's a lot more math than I was required to
Oh my
Wait,
gosh, I
for.
was doing math for the Illinois dispensary lottery. Do you know what the worst 1 in a billion figure that I got from applying the simple multiplication rule? Assuming that it's like a randomized lottery, you're going to have like a 1 over X. And so like how many, or like not necessarily 1, N, let's call it. Then N means how many ping pong balls, how many lottery tickets you bought, and then over X would be the total amount of the entire sample. And so you would multiply each, because in theory, it's supposed to be a random selection. And so each one is supposed to be its own instance. So it's just simple multiplication rule. 1 in 22 billion.
Jeez. That's amazing.
Going for the goal.
Yeah. Hey, Carlos, you said you guys are doing a seed to sell. Does that mean your medical side has patient registration as well?
So yes, they do. And the medical side was run by the Department of Health, and that is being merged or has already been merged with the Regulation and Licensing Department. And they are going to be responsible for operating the medical program as well as the recreational program. So there is a registry. You have to apply. You have to qualify with one of their conditions, and it's still operating as a separate program. But the issues, a lot of the issues, and I'm sure you both know, there's going to be, a supply and demand issue coming up here very shortly. The medical program has been growing, every year. I think the last number I saw was over 100,000 patients. So they are, in addition to all the recreational people, are going to be, gunning for limited supply, limited stock. So that's going to be a very interesting issue on top of the water issue, on top of, the unlimited licenses that they're trying to work with right now.
So if you're growing some real banging stuff and that 200 plant thing, and you were able to control a $6,000 a pound retail, which I think would be about $55 or $50 an eighth, that would be about 500 pounds of high quality flour, and you probably have 250 of trim that you'd want some bubble hash makers to get rid of. But that would be $3 million on the top line revenue. If everything goes perfectly and you're harvesting 5.7 times a year and you're yielding 50 grams per square foot. But $3 million on the top line revenue is fine for a business. It's fine. But I don't know how long it'll stay there. Like, that's $6,000 a pound at the retail level. Those suckers can slide down to 4,000, and then the $3 million just got down to 2.
Sure. I think it leads to very focused, I guess, like microbreweries is an analogy, but a real focus on creating, strains that are strain specific, that do specific issues. And I think that's you're still going to be able to command that higher price for that type of strain. Otherwise, the other strains that are generally, available everywhere, I could see the potential of those dropping in regards to sale price. But I think it's going to create a niche market within, the very new cannabis industry of people that are specialized in producing strains. And interestingly enough, there's also another license available for research and development, basically, for cannabis over here. So that's going to be brand new. And I'm thinking, they're going to team up with some other business entities to really go after that market and then really hold that down. So,
and then you're going to get new clients that want an intellectual property licensing agreement. And I've seen some of these from some of the MSOs. They're like 30 pages long, and it's amazing. And so I've seen how Cookies is moving, and it's like, oh, I bet they've signed one of these before. So it's kind of interesting, and that's going to be what's going to definitely result from those research-based micro brew. It's not a micro brew; it's a micro grow based, license types. But that's fantastic. It's one of the aspects that we're playing on our craft grow in Illinois is these sideways looking corporate structures, because that license that has the plant touching is so hot from a tax perspective. Or from a legal liability perspective. Like, nobody that's got a gun is working for that licensed facility, that LLC. We don't need to be mixing guns and the licensed transmission of weed, or the usage of entities to ensure that you're not going to get totally spanked by IRC 280E. That takes time and a lawyer to set up, and nobody ever wants to pay lawyers, ever, unless they have money and they realize how business works. Then they're like, just pay the lawyer $400,000. It'll save us $5.2 million.
You're absolutely right. And securing that type of information is invaluable, especially in an industry that's so brand new, where there isn't, I mean, we don't have any case law. There's some cases on the medical side of things, but there's nothing out there. I mean, we're literally creating this, or they are literally creating this on a daily basis. I mean, for instance, they just came out with the manufacturing rules like within the last week, and those weren't anticipated until January 1, 2022. So absolutely. I mean, you can come in, make your mistakes, and then pay a lawyer to fix your mistakes, which is, going to cost a lot more. That's do it right.
Yeah, and I love doing that one. I've done bits like that. Let me tell you how you can save a lot of money hiring a lawyer. You hire him now before you've created the problem, and you tell him what you want to do. And then he goes, well, or she, you're going to need to avoid this, this, and this. And how do I do that? Well, you can hire me. It's probably going to be about 30 to 40 hours of my time. Oh, don't you just have a form? I just have one thing that I need from you. And you've already done it before. Right. There's the door, buddy. We'll be back with a much worse problem in the future.
You guys are a cost, just like, my job, I'm in maintenance, it's a preventive maintenance. Like, the reason why I'm doing my job, because nothing fucking happens, right? Like, nothing happens. Nothing broke the next day. Everything's going the way it's supposed to be. It was kind of like with lawyers. You got to set up your business plan because you have the image, you have the vision, and then you guys help create the backbone. With that 200 plant limit, isn't that something like that can be grown in like a house? Right? Like a you don't think, like, I mean, I've seen it.
Want to grow 200 plants in a house, maybe an outbuilding. Like, you can have a residence adjacent to where you're growing. Right. But yeah, that's 800 square foot of flowering, and maybe like another 500. Well, depending on what your setup is. Do you have a nursery? Do you have a breeding room? What drying room? So you're talking about like 1,600 square feet at least.
Right.
And so that's like taking up the whole house.
Oh yeah, no, I totally. I mean, the reason why I'm asking or saying that is because of the water right issue. Because New Mexico is so unique, right? If I was a landowner in New Mexico, like an old hippie, does that water right pertain to the land itself? Like, could I start doing a farm, or are there like extra things I got to do just to get that water right?
So, I mean, if you want to grow on a homestead, you need to make sure that it's zoned properly, right? And then it's identified accordingly. But the space needed, yeah, I believe you could. I mean, you could have your water rights. You talk to the state engineer's office and you go through that process, which has its own, unique difficulties in the fact that, they may have never heard of the Cannabis Regulation Act. And they're like, what are you talking about? We need documentation. Like, we've never given that out before. I don't know what you're saying. But go ahead.
I was to say, if I was a rancher in New Mexico, I'd be hitting you guys up right now. I'd be like, because like you have the space, you have the ability, but now you need the person with the actual experience. You know what I mean?
Sure. And some of them do reach out, and they also come with unique circumstances. They don't know how to grow. They don't know how to farm, cannabis at all. They don't necessarily know, how to do it. They know that they farm Timothy hay or alfalfa, and they're used to that, which is a little bit different than, producing some nice quality buds. So they often find themselves either trying to learn it on their own, and usually not necessarily being very successful at that, or they're farming out help. They're looking to hire farmers, and every day, at least today, it seems like every farmer you talk to is an expert in growing, and you're just like, are you really an expert in growing?
How many runs have you done? And then they look at you like, what's a run?
Exactly. So you have those unique circumstances, and there's some people that try to do it. There's some people that like, I have a farm, I want to convert it over. You tell me what I need, and I'll go pay for it, I guess. Yeah. And then there's some that you're just like, good luck, I guess, learning how to grow. I don't see this going well for you. I don't think that I'm going to be able to do anything for you right now.
Exactly.
Right. But that's our deal flow at cannabisindustrylawyer.com is ridiculous. All these people are so gung-ho and they really want to get in the industry, but they don't necessarily have any of the skill set. They don't have any of the knowledge. And then it's not just knowledge of the growing of the plant. It's also the knowledge of the orchestration and the operation of the cannabis industry and the business itself.
or even the culture. I mean, if you're not growing up using, you're not growing up with, the products, you don't know what products are out there. You don't know what you can make. You don't know, what products do what. You don't know what terpenes are. You're at a disadvantage because everybody coming in seems to be an expert, or at least they read something that makes them an expert online. So, they come requesting things and talking about, hash and oil and bubble hat. And like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. So I think being part of the culture is a huge advantage as well, to being a cannabis law attorney. And I feel like I've been part of the culture since the late 1900s, as my kids say it, the 90s.
Ha!
Nice.
Yeah, I've been part of the culture since pre-98 Bubba Kush.
Yeah.
Whoa. You must be old, Grandpa.
Carlos, do you think, do you have any fear of MSOs creeping in, or you think this water issue is going to be such a big thing, they're going to wait to scoop somebody up later?
I think they're already here, for sure. Additional ones creeping in. I mean, probably. I mean, there's probably three producers on the medical side that are probably, leaders in the industry at this point, with eyes on basically selling in the future and getting out, their exit event for liquidating their company. But do I think that they're coming in? Absolutely. Do I think they're all going to be successful? I mean, it depends on who they deal with, right? No offense, to Tom, but if you come in, with an out-of-state attorney, not necessarily knowing New Mexico laws, you're gonna come into some unique circumstances that you're gonna need help with. So I think depending on who they team up with, I think the level of success is going to vary.
Yeah, I'm more of a consultant when I'm outside of my own jurisdictions, and then I always have local counsel. So I have local counsels up and down the Eastern Seaboard, and working on one for Virginia, maybe one for New Mexico would be quite advantageous as well. Because when I saw the water issue, and then you always need local counsel because cannabis is very localized, especially in the dual nature system of a lot of the licensing rubrics, like in a Michigan or in a New Jersey or in a Massachusetts. But that's a question that just comes off the top of my head then. Is it going to be a dual licensing state, or is the state going to provide the license to the holder and then the municipality can't object?
So the municipalities cannot prevent the Cannabis Regulation Act from being enacted in their local jurisdictions. They can't prevent them from using the roads. They can regulate time, place and manner restrictions, and then the density of licenses, but they can't prevent the Cannabis Regulation Act from actually being operated within, the state bounds.
They can't even opt out because, like a lot of states, that's very similar to Illinois, where it's a top-down approach where there's the single licensing issuer, and that is the state, and the municipality really doesn't have anything to do about it. But a municipality could opt out and say, we aren't going to allow businesses here. And then when they come in next time, they can't say, but we want 3 licenses like they do in Kettering, Maine, for example. They're about to have a dispo lottery there.
No, they can't opt out at all, but they can regulate, through zoning, time, place, and manner restrictions.
And zoning, and water rights, all of those. But the communities have always been very, very important in the license applications that I do, simply because if they don't want you there, you're screwed. And having a local council involved is very, very important, especially if that local council has some zoning understanding. And then in the case of New Mexico, some water rights. But it's probably still municipal law at a certain level if the water rights are arising from the state.
Correct. And then, I mean, like I said, it's also, getting out there, knock and talk with some of these people, personally just go introduce yourself and, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. I need your help. I need your expertise, really build them up, and you can attract more flies with honey than vinegar, is that the saying? So I like to throw a bunch of honey on and go try to talk with people and see, because they're all learning, like I said, and I would like to influence their learning if at all possible, if I could.
I think I smoked way too much weed. I just had a picture of somebody just licking themselves up with honey, walking into the city council office, be like, "Hey, I'm here. Let's do this.
Guess who's here to party?
Carlos said I'm about to get honey up.
You may not like it, but this is what a cannabis law attorney looks like. Who do I talk to?
There you go. A lot of judgment in the room. I can tell.
What licenses are available right now with the new law? What can we do? What is available?
So cannabis producer licenses are available, and then cannabis producer micro business licenses. The main The main difference is the cap for the micro businesses. You can only have 200 plants. If you're a cannabis producer, you can go all the way up to 8,000 plants, depending on what tier you start in. So a lot more production. And then in addition to that, the producer license has a per plant fee attached to it. So if you're selling recreational, it's $10 per plant. And then if you're going for the medical, it's $5 per plant on top of the yearly licensing fee. And then that licensing fee, it's $2,500 for the license for the cannabis producer, plus $1,000 for each additional licensed premises. And then for the micro producer, if you cap yourself at 100, it costs $500. And then if you grow the full 200, you're at 1,000.
Can you co-locate? So can I have my cultivation in the same facility that I have my processing?
Yes, you can definitely have those particular those functions, I guess, of the seed to sale in the same place. You can have multiple licenses in one premises.
Yeah.
One owner can have multiple licenses as well. So
yep.
yes.
And for tax purposes and also for insulation of risk purposes, you should consider having all of those as their own separate LLCs. The ownership on the back end can be very much overlapping, don't get me wrong, and contracts between them, but mitigate the risk and isolate the license itself.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Yes, absolutely.
What is like so far now? I mean, your market rolls out next year, right, for recreational?
For sales, yeah, in April of 2022 is the deadline.
What's it look like so far for startup costs for everybody getting to either a processor or even a dispensary itself?
Startup costs on the medical side of things were substantial. Essentially, you have to have all the infrastructure, ready to go for review. I mean, startup costs, it also really depends on what your operation is, right? So, I mean, depends on what you're trying to do, whether you're going to be a grower, cultivator, cannabis consumption area, which is new, which will be interesting.
That is
just
nice.
Is that its own limit? Is that its own license type, the cannabis consumption area?
It's its own license type. Yeah, $2,500 is the cost on that. And interestingly enough, they have a provision for cannabis consumption on the medical side of things, but to my knowledge, there hasn't been any on-site cannabis consumption that I'm aware of so far. But I think that's a huge business opportunity that presents itself, especially for people that you go somewhere kind of like a lounge type setting and you want to consume on premises. I think that's where everything's going. So
like if I was advising clients in your jurisdiction, it was local there, I'd be pushing them. If they're going to go to dispo, you absolutely want to go for a lounge as well, because you're not allowed to deduct a lot of that cost when you have a dispo. Like maybe you can allocate your inventory manager, maybe, and say that that's COGS, and then it's all the costs of your weed, and that's it. And so if you have and this is when it gets weird. If you have an SPV and that SPV is holding your real estate for your consumption lounge, and you can operate that and then run it like it's just a regular business. And so you have all your brand and IP rights and contracts inside that SPV, and then they'd be paying, rent or something like that. It gets ridiculously complex. And the whole point is because you can't deduct anything. You can't deduct your branding. You can't deduct your employees. You can't. So if you were a cultivator and you wanted to have a genetics component, that sounds more like trafficking than COGS. But we'd have to talk with a very good accountant to see if we can classify genetics as COGS or if that would be a trafficking expense.
And if you can find an accountant that doubles as a tax attorney and he's got like an LLM or something and it's been in the cannabis space, pay them for whatever they're charging you, because they have very invaluable information. And that 280 is a huge disadvantage. They'll help you work around it to the best of their abilities and to minimize, that as best they can.
I thought we could set up a business off of Greece. Isn't that where most of the Panama paper people were at? One of
No, I'd be putting them into the Cook Islands, and so like there'd be a this very interesting related entity that's organized in the Cook Islands, and that is a subsidiary of one of these license holders, and then you run everything through that because you only have jurisdiction to sue a Cook Islands company if you go to the Cook Islands, which is just what are you going to do? How are you going to enforce that contract?
Well, and then isn't there LLC protections in Puerto Rico too? I think. I mean, again, I'm a guy who's not in business.
That's income tax, and so people move to Puerto Rico to not pay federal income tax.
There we go. But what? So you were talking about social equity earlier, Carlos. What is the play? What's going to happen later on?
With the social, I mean, it's a good question. Hopefully, the plan is to build up New Mexico and its communities. I listened to your guys' show in regards to, I think it was actually when they were taking the vote on the bill, but they had a separate piece, an expungement piece of the bill. So I don't know if you all got a chance to read that, but it does address any sort of, past cannabis convictions and any sort of issues that are basically expunged after, the enactment of the Cannabis Regulation Act. So that's good. That's a good start. The request in the actual, application itself. They want a lot of diversity, a lot of New Mexico diversity in the applicants and the applications. Employing New Mexicans. Any gender, any age, any race. They're open to everything. People that have been past, been prosecuted on cannabis issues. And hopefully it leads to more of an acceptance of the industry itself, more of an understanding of people that have been, wrongfully convicted and or prosecuted over, possessing, less than an ounce or possessing a joint, giving some more perspective, I guess, as to this isn't as bad as you think. You got Joe Blow coming in who got high a little earlier, but then you have this other person that's on opioids all day and is passing out. Like, this is a big deal. So hopefully it leads to more acceptance, more participation throughout the state, not just non-reservations, but there are a lot of reservations over here. There are a lot of low-income communities. Hopefully they can participate in that and be able to supply and help feed their economies.
Do you think, like, once you guys are no longer last in the school system, that might help?
So yeah, that'd be a huge plus for us. We're always on that list, right? As long as we're above Mississippi, though, we're all right. So, but
that tax revenue, yeah.
You guys are approaching the marijuana laws way better than Mississippi.
Yeah, I would agree on that too. But that's the plan, right? These tax revenues are supposed to feed the education system, feed infrastructure, feed, provide
the
jobs
communities that they were just ravaging for the past 80 years.
Absolutely. So I think it's a good start to include that piece into the license. What comes of it, I don't know. I don't know what people are drafting. I know what I'm drafting, and I like to touch on reinvestment into the community. Making sure that we're open and accepting to everybody. It's 2021. You got to be very careful as to who you deal with, how you deal with people. Just be aware that there's a lot more going on than there was in the 90s. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. I think with 10 years experience, you should be all right.
Are you going to get entrepreneurial yourself? You think you're going to try to team up or just have your own license?
We thought about it as a firm. I've thought about it as just an individual. Potentially. There's a lot of space to get into the industry, not necessarily touching the plant, but absolutely. If I could retire from doing litigation, that'd be great. You go to litigate in front of court.
Litigation and cannabis. And so, like, I got out of litigation 2 years later. Like, I remember it was $1.8 million. I tagged that Brady son of a bitch. But then, and then I got out of the game in April of 2020, and now it's pulling me back in because 1 in 22 billion odds. Oh my God. This one dude in Illinois, he won 19 licenses. The limit was 10. He already had 2, and so it's just like seeing a due process claim just waiting, and it's like, man, that is going to blow up in 2 years. And the reason that they did that was because they made these limited licenses, and then they're changing the law as they go in the process. So it's ridiculous. And now I have to, and then once that's over, Now you're going to have shareholder disputes out the wazoo because they had to make sure that they had social equity. So all these social equity people that were being used as patsies are like, we won? I better talk to a lawyer. Dude, you should have called me months ago. What do you mean you don't have any money? Well, that's probably why they were exploiting you. Yeah.
That's true. That's very true. And then, you know, since we do family law too, we also have the cannabis issue pop up a bunch with custody stuff. And it's unique in New Mexico because it's so spread out. It's such a big, you know, geographical state, you know, not a lot of people, but the courtrooms are very, they very much have an opinion as to the industry in and of itself. You know, we've had people saying, you know, you have a medical card. That's just, you know, a bullshit way to say you're going to smoke weed. Like, no, this is an actual program. She has a debilitating, you know, medical condition. You know, this can't be held against them. You know, as a parent, you know, this is a huge issue. And then there's also issues with, you know, children themselves that have to utilize cannabis for like seizures. And they're having issues, you know, administering that at schools and finding somebody that feels, you know, like, I don't want the liability on me to administer this, or where do I administer this? So it's weird with the litigation with the child custody stuff too. And then
the legalization changed that. And so like a lot of times, because that pissed me off in Illinois when I first started practicing years ago, you'd see these feuding spouses being like, well, drug test him, he smokes weed. And so give me the kits. And then I hated that just because they're using cannabis as a weapon in the contested divorce. Are there protections now because it's been legalized in New Mexico for preventing that type of fact pattern?
There's an explicit protection in the statute itself. It says it can't, you know, be the sole factor, you know, in saying that it's going to change custody. But unfortunately, the uniformity is not there in the court systems either. I mean, in the North, you're going to be litigating a case and they're very accepting of the program and the industry. And then you go litigate a case in the South and it's totally different. You know, you have totally different views. So you find yourself a lot of times educating, you know, the judge at that particular hearing on top of arguing, you know, custody and you know, timeshare stuff. So it's very interesting, but there is an explicit provision in there that says, you know, it's not to be held against you. And, you know, hopefully that, you know, really gets into, you know, the court system, the judicial system. As a firm, we've taken the initiative of creating the cannabis law section here in New Mexico to try to, you know, help educate the judiciary and other attorneys and, you know, making sure that, you know, we participate in a positive light in the industry.
Do you walk in with like an education packet that has like the endocannabinoid system, the patent, and then like the 9 federal patients or 15 at one point? You know, I mean, like it's medicine. That's the problem. They don't understand it as medicine, man. And then just the fact that you're out there, we appreciate you so much, dude.
Thank you. And yes, we actually have a manufacturer on our board, and he has very great infographics, you know, on terpenes, on the types of cannabis, you know, and how it grows, full spectrum, you know, non-full spectrum. And we have in the New Mexico Bar Bulletin coming up in November, we're going to have a whole section dedicated to, you know, cannabis law and the cannabis law section. We're going to insert his infographic in it, and he does, you know, really good work. So we do kind of a little bit.
Cool. Nice. Where can we find legal solutions in New Mexico and what you guys got going on?
You can find us at our website, legalsolutionsofnm.com. We post a lot of blogs. We have a lot of free information on the industries, both medical and you know, recreational. Phone call. We're phone call away. You know, 505-445-4444.
It's a lot of course.
It is a lot. It was pretty easy to remember the phone number. We picked it specifically because we were thinking, I was like, I don't remember the last time I had to remember a phone number. You type it in once and then it comes up as a name. And, you know, after that, if you lose your phone and if you can find a payphone, you know, what are you going to dial? So our firm's, hopefully it's easy. The 505 we represent. New Mexico United. I don't know if you all watch soccer, but throw them a shout out too.
Nice.
Love supporting them. But yeah, we have, you know, videos posted. We have our upcoming CLE, continuing legal education, coming up here in November. So lots of educational opportunities.
Awesome.
Heck yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us, Carlos. Really appreciate you coming on and explaining all the ins and outs of New Mexico's new cannabis program.
Absolutely. Tom, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, man.